Ok. Se calhar eu vou fazer em português, não há aqui. Ok, então se calhar vou fazer em inglês. Okay, so welcome. First, I'd like to apologize for yesterday. It was a bit bad, but and I also like to thank the Sapo team for letting me do this today. So my presentation is Evolutionary Robots, how to create artificial brains for machines. First, I'd like to start a bit with who I am. My name is Miguel. I'm a robotics and AI PhD student at iscte. I like to think of myself as a geek and a hacker, and like to mess around with new technology and do crazy stuff. I also really like sci-fi, technology, and robotics, of course. And I'm a metalhead and a petrolhead, so you might find me in a mosh pit near you. So what am I going to talk about today? So I'm going to explain why you should consider evolutionary robotics if you're thinking about doing work in robotics, how evolutionary algorithms work, just a simple overview, talk a bit about the challenges of using evolutionary techniques in robotics, and show off some cool projects. But first, I'd like to give a bit of context in this world of robotics, so you understand why I think this technique is good. So the first works in robotics started a long time ago. So in 400 BC, we had our first mechanical bird, which was a pigeon by Archytas. So this was just a simple mechanical bird that flew 200 meters. But it shows that people have started thinking about imitating life with hardware really early. Then we have the example of Da Vinci's Mechanical Knight, although it was just a concept, because at the time they didn't have the technology to pull it off, and we don't today. But you can see that he was a visionary, and he was really thinking about the things that robots can do for us. In the 1940s and 50s, it was when robotics really started as a research field. And one of the most important works from that time was Shaky. This is Shaky the robot. So, and this branch of robotics is known as good old-fashioned artificial intelligence and robotics. So the idea is that the robot creates a model of the world, and then it acts on that model and executes actions on the real world. So these robots were quite slow, they had to process a lot, and at the time the hardware wasn't very good. In the case of Shaky, it could use a camera and navigate around the environment, open doors, push objects, and it was a very important work at the time, because not only did they manage to get the robots working and doing things, but also some major contributions of this work was the A-star pathfinding algorithm and the hue transform. If you know about computer vision, you know what the hue transform is. So in the 1980s, the paradigm shifted a little bit into behavior-based robotics. So before, the robots had to create a model of the world and then use that information to choose what to do. And then in the 80s, Rodney Brooks came up with this idea that robots should only sense what's around them and act on that. So much more like an insect, okay? So it doesn't have to plan its actions, it should just react to the environment. And this approach allowed you to create a hierarchy of behaviors. So on the lowest level of the hierarchy, you'll have the behaviors like avoid obstacles, and then on top of that you'd create more and more complex behaviors. So if the robot found an obstacle, it would use the lowest level behavior, but if there was no obstacle, it would use the more complex behaviors. And nowadays, most use of robotics is in factories. We are very good at making highly specialized robots that do a single task very fast and with extreme accuracy, but we are not able to have robots that are adaptable. Okay, And these are typically hand-coded robots that are specified for a single task, like in factories. So if we want robots in our daily lives, we cannot expect to program everything. It's very difficult to account for every single situation that a robot might encounter in real life. Although we have some very interesting technical demos, these types of robots don't really generalize and they do not learn how to do stuff, okay? Although they have some pretty sophisticated algorithms, the robot does not learn how to do a task by itself, so it has to come from the programmer to implement all those features. So here comes evolutionary robotics. With evolutionary robotics, basically, we can have self-organized behavior. And what does this mean? We don't have to specify how the robot should do a task. We only have to specify what is the goal, and the robot should learn how to do that by itself. And the controllers are also adaptable, so they can work in different conditions. So in this case, the robot was probably programmed to go up the stairs that had that particular length, and it still did not work as well. So these types of controllers are able to generalize. And how do we do this? We do this using evolutionary algorithms and artificial neural networks. So that's not really a neural network that we use, that's just an example. And first, I'm going to talk a bit about evolutionary algorithms. So the idea comes from Darwin in the theory of evolution. And basically, you all should know about this. It's about the survival of the fittest. So you have multiple individuals in an environment, and the ones that are able to adapt better to that environment will survive and then reproduce and create new individuals that share some of the same traits. And that in biology is done with the DNA. So that's how we propagate our genes and our characteristics to the next generation. And using computers, you can also do stuff like this. So stepping a bit out of robotics now, I'm going to give you an example of, a very simple example of how an evolutionary algorithm works. So imagine that you are trying to find the best camouflage. You could use it in a robot, okay? So how do you find the best color that works in a particular environment? First, you start off with many different colors. Start off with a random number of colors. And then you test all of them and you score them. So in here you could see that the fourth one has a better score, so it's better as a camouflage. Then you take the best one, or the top best, and you create new colors based on that one. Okay, you create new solutions. You can use mutation, or if you have more than one, like two, you can use recombination. So you can mix two individuals or solutions or colors to create a new one. So hopefully, by changing the one that was best, you're able to find one that's similar and that might be even better. So if you could hypothetically test all the colors, this is fictional, okay? You'd have a fitness landscape. And this basically is the search space of the algorithm. So you could see that in this case, the green would have a higher fitness, so it will have the best performance. This is just an example for one gene. So in this evolutionary algorithm of the camouflage, you're only choosing one color, so you could have like an integer or a double value. That would translate to a color. So you could, with a single integer, create all these different colors. And then you change that number, and you, bit by bit, you go up the fitness landscape until you reach a maximum. But instead, if you had two colors instead of one, so you had two genes, you could think of the fitness landscape with one more dimension, okay? So in this case, you'd have a three-dimensional fitness landscape. You choose one color here, another one there, and you end up with the fitness. So if you choose black and blue, you'd have a certain fitness. If you choose light green and dark green, maybe you'd have a higher fitness. And usually, when we are evolving neural networks, which I'm going to talk about next, you don't have just 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions. You have hundreds of dimensions. So this is a very complex search space, and it's very computationally intensive to find the correct combination to create a network for the robot. Okay, so what I'm going to show you next is a simple example of how an evolutionary algorithm works. Basically, you have a simple car, and the objective is for the car to get to the end. Okay, the car has a few sensors that can detect the walls, and you control the speed of the wheels. And as you'll see, in the first generation, they are chosen randomly, and most of them get stuck. One of them gets further away. So you are going to choose the one that performed best, which is this one, because it got further away. And these individuals will be based on that one, or the top best. And as you can see, by using mutation, you can create new individuals that are sort of like the first one. And if you do that over and over and again, you can create better and better individuals until after a few generations, all of them converge to a good solution. So the idea is pick the best, change that to a similar one, and then pick the best again, and hopefully you'll get better and better controllers, okay? Anyone have a question so far? Okay. Okay, and you want to?
Doesn't this model allow for 90% of our population to have one way of working and 10% to continue to work randomly like the rest? Because if you choose only the best one,
Exactly.
your model will only work for one setup, this one.
Yes.
For any other that can change within this model.
You don't have to choose just the best one. Okay, so he asked if you only choose the best solution, if I think you'll only get the same solution over and over again, right? You can choose. Usually in my work, we choose like the top 10%, and that way you'll have multiple solutions that, although they might have similar fitness, they might have different behaviors, different ways to solve the task. Okay, so you don't have to choose just the best one.
When you said first time that is fun, how did you know that it's like God, let's say,
Yes, you are God. Although although I haven't mentioned it, you measure the fitness of an individual with an evaluation function or a fitness function, and you can play God. If you are in simulation, you can say, okay, this one has the furthest position, or you can even just use the internal sensors of the robot if the task allows it. Okay, if the robot has to get near a light source, you can just measure how close you are to the light source. Okay, so artificial neural networks. So this is what we are going to evolve using the evolutionary algorithms, right? So don't be scared. This is a typical artificial neural network. And basically, artificial neural networks are biologically inspired computational models. They are inspired by the brain, right? So we have neurons and synapses. But you can think of a neural network just as a mathematical function. You have inputs, like you have variables in a complex equation, and you have an output. You can have more than one output, actually. So if we look closer at one of the neurons here, so these two balls are the neurons, and the connections are the synapses. And each connection has a weight that can change using the evolutionary algorithm. So the mutation that I talked about changes little by little these weights. So this is going to change the dynamics of the network. And each neural network has an activation function. So based on what you get from the inputs, that goes through a function. In this case, it's a sigmoid function, but you can use any different kind of function. and that will generate an output of the neuron. That output will be multiplied by the weight of the connection, and then going to the next one. So basically, you get numbers here, you multiply the numbers by the weights, those get added, and based on the activation function, you get an output at the end of the neuron, right? It's just multiplying and adding. Then, hopefully, in the end, you'll have a value based on the values that propagate through the network. So in the case of robots, what do? We have the inputs, which are used, are directly connected to the sensors of the robot. So imagine that the robot has an infrared sensor that can detect the distance. That value can be directly fed into the network, okay? And then you have the outputs, which we can connect to the actuators of the robot. So based on what the robot is sensing at a given time, that will influentiate what the actuators of the robot will do. I'm going to show you a very simple example just so you understand. So imagine this robot. It's a very simple robot. It has 2 wheels. It has 2 light sensors. And there is a light a bit to the left, okay? And we have a very simple neural network to the right. And this usually runs inside the robot. So this is the brain of the robot. So in this network, we just have 2 neurons on the input and 2 neurons on the output. And these ones are connected to the light sensors. And those are connected to the motors of the robots. And in this diagram, the width of the connection represents the weight. So the thickest the arrow is, the more weight the connection has. So as you can see, the left light sensor has a very strong connection to the left motor, but it doesn't have a very strong connection to the right motor. So in this case, imagine that the robot is sensing the light to the left. So this sensor will have a high activation, that one not so much. What do you think will happen? How will this robot behave? So this neuron will have a high activation. The left motor will have a high activation because it has a very strong connection. So the robot will slowly turn away from the lights, right? Are you guys figuring this out? Okay. And so with a very simple network, you have created a robot that is afraid of lights. And if we do the opposite, if we just switch the strength of the connections, now the left sensor is connected to the right motor. What will happen now? Exactly. So just by switching the weights of the network, we have dramatically changed the behavior of the robot. So now it will turn towards the light, and when the light is straight in front, both motors will actuate with the same speed. So we have, just by evolution, it isn't, okay, it just manually changed the weights. But as I told you before, evolution can change by mutation or recombination the weights of the network, and that has an impact on the behavior of the robot. Actually, I found a video on YouTube of a robot doing this. So this one is afraid of lights. So the guy is putting the light next to the robot, and it's turning away from the light. So as you can see, you can have sort of this, I wouldn't say biological behavior, but not that what we usually see in robots, which is go forward and then turn 90 degrees and go. Okay, so it's more natural behavior, because these neural networks, if the light is very far away, they'll turn just a little. If the light is very close, it'll turn much more. Okay. So how do we do this? Usually, we have to use simulation. To do this, we need a robot model. So imagine that you have that simple model robot with 2 wheels. You just implement how those wheels behave. A task, you have to decide what the robot should do. And then you have the evaluation fitness function, or evaluation or fitness function, which just describes how well the robot is doing that task. So if you want the robot to, it's going around here and it should get out of the dome, you are going to reward it based on how close it got to the dome. At first, they will all just go against the walls or just spin in circles, but maybe one of them will get a little bit closer by luck, and then you'll mutate that one. Okay. So simulators don't have to be this complex. You can have a simple simulator if you have a simple robot, although if you start moving into these kind of robots, the nows or other type of humanoid robots, you really have to have the robot modeled correctly, and the physics, it's not easy to do. Okay, so evolutionary robotics right now is only for simple robots and simple tests, but I'll talk a bit more about that. I'm going to start talking about the challenges. There are two main problems with evolutionary robotics. This is the first one, the bootstrapping problem. And what this means is that it's difficult for robots to learn how to do very difficult tests. Imagine that you want a robot to go and buy you something at the grocery store. How would you measure how well it's doing? If he got home with the milk, at first he won't even be able to get out of the home and navigating the sidewalks and get into the correct shelf, right? It's very complex. How would you incrementally tell it, okay, you're doing okay, let's try a different controller that's similar to that one. So usually evolutionary robotics is only used for very simple tests like maze navigation, obstacle avoidance, some tests that relate with memory, and so on. So this is still a bit inside the lab, okay? And then the other problem is that since evolution is very computationally intensive, we have to use simulation, although there are some techniques which evolve the controls directly on the robot, but usually you have to do it in simulation. And you have to implement physics, you have to implement the sensors of the robot, you have to implement the actuators, and they are not going to be exactly like in reality, right? In reality, the robot will maybe sleep a bit. There is noise in the sensor that you can't model exactly because you have different types of material. So if you evolve a controller in simulation and transfer it to a real robot, it might not behave as good as you thought it would. Okay? Because evolution is very opportunistic, so it takes advantage of those small features of the simulation in order to get a good fitness. And then the robot in real life will not have those features available. So just to give you a brief overview of what I'm doing, I'm a PhD student, so I'm trying to solve both these problems that I talked to you about, which is the bootstrapping problem, you can't evolve complex behaviors, and the crossing the reality gap, which is getting from the simulation to the real robot correctly. So how I'm trying to do this is to hierarchically decompose behavior. So imagine that example of getting the robot to buy you something at the grocery store and bring you back home. Doing that thing in one go is very difficult. So my idea is to have a hierarchical decomposition of behaviors. So you start with simple ones. Maybe you could evolve by behavior that just the robot knows how to get out of your house. That would be fairly easy, okay? Then you evolve a behavior that knows how to navigate a sidewalk, and one that knows how to grab the milk, and then one that knows how to come back, okay? So you could have a bunch of generic behaviors that you could then use to train neural networks to do complex things. So in here we have two elements, which are the behavior arbitrators and the primitives. The primitives actually control the actuators of the robot, like I showed you in that robot that followed the light or got away from the lights. So this could be a locomotion behavior that got out of your house, for instance. And then you have the behavior arbitrators, which are also neural networks, but they are trained just to choose what behavior to use, okay? So imagine that you have a neural network that knows how to do stuff, and you have a neural network that is more like a brain that makes decisions of, you need to do this now, you need to do this now, right? Are you getting the idea? So the first experiments that we tried, these are actually more complex than any that have been done in evolutionary robotics. So the idea is here is that this is a rescue task. The robot starts in this room, has a few obstacles that it has to avoid, can't crash into the walls, has to find the exit of the room. Then we have a double T maze here. And what is a double T maze? Basically, we have two rows of lights. Maybe you've seen them flashing. And the lights can be either on the left or on the right of the robot. So in this case, you have a light on the right and a light on the left. And as the robot passes by those lights, it detects which side it saw the light. Then it has to choose the correct exit of the maze where a teammate is. So it has to turn right and then left because the lights were right and left. It gets to the teammate and then leads it back to the initial room. So this might seem very basic, right? But you have to take into account a couple of things. First, the robot is almost blind. It has a few infrared sensors around it, but it can only sense up to 10 centimeters. So most of the time the robot isn't even actually feeling anything. How would you program a robot to do this if you don't know where you are, where you've been? So this is where evolution comes up and allows us to do this automatically. You don't have to worry about if I'm close to a wall, move forward, and then if I'm close to a wall in front, I have to turn right. The neural network just learns how to do that. And then the types of network that we use also have a certain amount of memory. So there's one layer of neurons that are interconnected between themselves. So from one time step to the other, it's able to keep some states. So the robot is able to actually remember that it saw lights and that it has to turn in that direction. But if you recall that example of the car, the robot doesn't know the car that had to solve that simple maze, okay, that I showed the evolutionary algorithm on. The robot, although it gets the inputs on the network, it doesn't know that it's a light sensor. It doesn't know that it's a proximity sensor. The robot doesn't know what it's feeling, okay? It just know that it gets inputs. It's like you are in like a video that I'm going to show. It's like you are in a black box, and you get some values. You don't know what they are, and you have to do something with those values. The network has to, over time, gradually understand what the sensors mean and even how to move. Okay. We are also working with using evolutionary algorithms and networks with the AR drone. We are taking the first steps, although this might be a bit dangerous because using evolutionary algorithms and neural networks, you don't really know what the robot might do. You cannot test all the possible combination of inputs to the neural network. So although you have a robot that learned how to do something by itself and it can generalize its knowledge, if you give it a certain type of input that you didn't in simulation, you don't know what the neural network dynamics will do. So you might have a robot that will come and try to kill you or something, but let's hope not. So I'm going to show you a small video. It's around 4 or 5 minutes. Although it's not directly related with neural networks, related directly with evolutionary algorithms and robots, and I think it's very interesting. So let's see.
Very soon that will be doing everything for us. They'll be cooking, cleaning, buying things, shopping, building, but they're not here. Meanwhile, we have the legal immigrants doing all the work, but we don't have any robots. So what can we do about that? What can we say? So I want to give a little bit of a different perspective of what we can, how we can perhaps look at these things in a little bit of a different way. This is an X-ray picture of a real beetle and the Swiss watch back from '88. You look at that, it's what was true then is certainly true today. We can still make the pieces, we can make the right pieces, we can make the circuitry with the right computational power, but we can't actually put them together to make something that will actually work and be as adaptive as these systems. So let's try to look at it from a different perspective. Let's summon the best designer, the mother of all designers. Let's see what evolution can do for us. So we created a primordial soup with lots of pieces of robots, with bars, with motors, with neurons, put them all together and put all this under kind of natural selection, under mutation, and rewarded things for how well they can move forward. Very simple task. And it's interesting to see what kind of things came out of that. So if you look, you can see a lot of different machines come out. They all move around, they all crawl in different ways. And you can see on the right that we actually made a couple of these things and they work in reality. These are not very fantastic robots, but they evolved to do exactly what we reward them for moving forward. So that was all done in simulation, but we can also do that on real machines. Here's a physical robot that we actually have a population of brains competing or evolving on the machine. It's like a rodeo show. They all get a ride on the machine, and they get rewarded for how fast or how far they can make the machine move forward. And you can see these robots are not ready to take over the world yet, but you can, they gradually learn how to move forward, and they do this autonomously. So in these two examples, we had basically machines that learned how to work in simulation, and also machines that learned how to walk in reality. But I want to show you a different approach, and this is this robot over here, which has 4 legs. It has 8 motors, 4 in the knees and 4 in the hip. It has also 2 tilt sensors that tell the machine how which way it's tilting. But this machine doesn't know what it looks like. You look at it and you see it has 4 legs. The machine doesn't know if it's a snake, if it's a tree. It doesn't have any idea what it looks like. But it's going to try to find that out. So initially it does some random motion. And then it tries to figure out what it might look like. And you're seeing a lot of things passing through its mind, a lot of self-models that try to explain the relationship between actuation and sensing. And then tries to do a second action that creates the most disagreement among predictions of these alternative models, like a scientist in the lab. Then it does that and tries to explain that and prune out its self-models. This is already the last cycle, and you can see it's pretty much figured out what itself looks like. And once it has a self-model, it can use that to derive a pattern of locomotion. So what you're seeing here are a couple of a pattern of locomotion. We were hoping that it's going to have a kind of evil spidery walk, but instead it created this pretty lame way of moving forward. But when you look at that, you have to remember that this machine did not do any physical trials on how to move forward, nor did it have a model of itself. It kind of figured out what it looks like and how to move forward, and then actually try that out. So we'll move forward to a different idea. So that was what happened when we had a couple of. That's what happened when we had a couple of. Okay. They don't like each other. So there's a different robot. That's what happened when the robots actually are rewarded for doing something. What happens if you don't reward them for anything? You just throw them in. So we have these cubes, like the diagram showed here. The cube can swivel or flip on its side, and we just throw 1,000 of these cubes into a soup. This is in simulation, and don't reward them for anything. Just let them flip. We put energy into this and see what happens. A couple of mutations. So initially nothing happens, they're flipping around there. But after a very short while, you can see these blue things on the right there begin to take over. They begin to self-replicate. So in the absence of any reward, the intrinsic reward is self-replication. And we've actually built a couple of these, and this is part of a larger robot made out of these cubes. It's an accelerated view, where you can see the robot actually carrying out some of this replication process. So you feed it in with more material, cubes in this case, and more energy, and it can make another robot. So of course this is a very crude machine, but we're working on a micro-scale version of these, and hopefully the cubes will be like the powder that you pour in. Okay, so what can we learn? These robots are of course not very useful in themselves, but they might teach us something about how we can build better robots, and how perhaps how humans, animals create self-models and learn. And one of the things that I think is important is that we have to get away from this idea of designing the machines manually, and actually let them evolve and learn children, and perhaps that's the way we'll get there. Thank you.
Okay, so to kind of wrap it up. Basically what I think are the pros of this approach is that you get self-organization of behavior. You don't have to program what the robot should do, just tell him if you get close to the door, that's good, and just let evolution take care of that. You don't have to worry about how the sensors work, if the sensor at 500 means that it's closed, or if it's at 0 means that it's closed. Evolution just figure it out. The neural networks are tolerant to noise, so they're able to also generalize. So if if the wall is a bit closer or a bit further away, the neural network can handle those changes. So as we saw in that Asimo video that he followed down the stairs, he was prepared for very predefined lengths of the stairs, and maybe it didn't work out that well. So in here we have, if you train the robot with many different scenarios, it will adapt to those scenarios. But you have to train it. You can't just train a neural network with a single scenario and hope that it will work for every single scenario. So if you want a robot to navigate on a maze, you can test the same neural network with a bigger maze, a smaller maze, and then it will adapt to that. And the cons are basically this only kind of works in the lab. We are not up to the point of using this in real life. But I think that robotics right now is not that close to being present in our daily lives. So maybe using evolutionary techniques with traditional robotics techniques could help us get some of that adaptability. And controllers might be unpredictable, as I mentioned, because you cannot test every single input and output combination of the networks. And even when you have recurrent connections inside the networks, it's even more difficult to replicate all kinds of state. So I hope that we don't end up with this. But if you'd like to ask any questions or discuss this, because really the reason that I got into this field is because I find it fascinating. And if you guys want to have a discussion about this, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
That video showed that the blue bots start getting together, organizing, and building more replicator. Do you think that's evolution? It's the idea of getting better together.
Yes. Basically, the ones that are the fittest in that particular environment ended up taking over the ones that were a bit weaker, right? So that's the idea, where you can take the best one and improve on that. And as the generations go by, you get better and better solutions for that particular environment in that case.
Just like human cells.
Exactly.
Growing together.
The idea is that. So if you go into a hostile environment, maybe if you go with a few friends, not all of them are fit to survive there. Maybe 2 of them will survive, and those will have the opportunity to create a new generation, right? That will share the same kind of traits that allowed you to survive in the first place. And then they'll get even better and better at adapting to that particular environment.
Current electronics, like Wanda, the cleaning stuff, are based on this stuff, or
No. No, as far as I know. Okay, so he asked if current robots such as the Roomba that cleans the floor are based on this technology. As far as I know, this is not used in any commercial products. The field is quite recent, and by recent I mean like almost 20 years old, the field of evolutionary robotics, and we still don't have that much progress in the real world. We have made many progress in the lab, have many different techniques of neural networks and evolutionary algorithms that are able to adapt after you have evolved the neural network. So suppose that you evolve a neural network and it's fixed, the robot should do something. But there are some techniques that allow the robot to continually evolve even when it's doing its task. So I don't think that we'll be able to use just evolutionary robotics in the real world, but I think that combining these with traditional control, because in the case of Asimo, if you program it to like maybe evolving locomotion on such a very complex robot is difficult. But if you program that and then use evolution to so that the robot figures out what it should do in the real world, or combine different kinds of behaviors at the same time, I think that might be useful in everyday robotics.
How do you reward a robot that is playing a football game, scoring a goal? Do you reward it with survival? It's not like something you can just put a factor and score.
When you reward the robots, you actually have to test them out. So if you want to create a team of robots that play football, you have to play a match and see how well they do, okay? So maybe you create 100 different teams randomly. One of them scores a goal, the others don't score any goal, they just go and run away from the field. That would probably happen. The one that scores a goal maybe has a chance to become better. So that one will rank better than the others. But you can't just use that simple score a goal method. You probably have to reward them for little stuff also, like how close they get to the ball, how far away they take the ball to the other team, because scoring a goal is already a bit complex, right? So that's what I was mentioning about. It's not easy to evolve things for complex tasks, but you could start by evolving robots that would just find the ball and go near it, okay? And then once you have those, you could change the evaluation function and make the robot score them based on how close they take the ball to the other goal, okay? So you'd have a robot that takes the ball to the other goal already, and then you can even change it up again and reward them for scoring goals. So you can take that approach, or the one that I'm currently trying to use. You could have a behavior that is get close to the ball, you evolve that, and then you have a behavior that is bring the ball to the goal, and you have a different behavior which is score a goal, and then you train a neural network that to choose when it's the best time to use each of those behaviors. So the neural network will think, I don't have the ball, maybe I should move closer to the ball. Now that I have it, I should go towards the goal, you see? So there are different techniques to try to get these complex behaviors, and these are some of them. See?
I have two questions. The first one is, do you think, I'm a layman in robotics, but do you think there is, when a robot learns something, it basically creates, like we do, a memory bank of our experiences. Those experiences boil down, tell us what we should do when we are facing a situation. That's basically what they do, right? The neural network gathers information.
It's basically an instinct that the robot has. The neural network acts as an instinct. So after.
But it has to gather data somewhere to do that. Do you think you can transfer? You can make a robot learn to do something, and then transfer that knowledge digitally in an instant to another robot that will probably not do as well as the first one, but will start up with a lot of knowledge and will evolve from there.
Yeah, so the question is if we can take a robot that has learned how to do something and transfer it to another robot. Basically, what you just have to do is copy its DNA to another robot, which is the configuration of a neural network. It's just numbers, okay? It's the values of the weights of the synapses, okay, the synaptic weights, and the activation functions of each neuron. So when you put that into a robot, it's like it has an instinct. It reacts to things in a certain way. And if you transfer that to another robot, it will behave just the same way, okay?
So it is actually born like that?
Yes, it is born. Although there are some techniques which allow a robot that is born like that to change its own brain to adapt to things that it didn't learn before. So if there is a change in the environment, the robot thinks, okay, something is not right here, or I can't achieve my goal, so maybe I have to change a little bit in order to overcome that goal. So that kind of experience could also be transferred to another robot if you have the configuration of the network that the robot is currently using. You don't really have a database of knowledge of the robot, you just have a network, and it's basically the instinct that the robot uses. Okay.
The other question is the one we've been doing for the past 40 years. That this has been brought up. We've seen it in science fiction lots of times. What's your opinion? What do you think when we actually get robots to, when you don't, I'm actually programming a robot right now. I'm doing it obviously the easy way. So I'm telling him exactly what it will do.
Exactly.
When it gets certain input patterns. And what I told him was, when you don't have an input pattern that matches that, do anything. Just stop and wait for a human to come and reset you or do something, or set you off to another input pattern that you know and you can go on. That's easy. That's amazingly easy. Do you think having robots basically deciding, making decisions, do you think we will, because you probably realize that you lose control of your program. When you let your program evolve, there is one threshold where you actually don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
It's working by itself. It's scary.
It is.
I've done that once or twice. It's scary. You lose control. We are engineers, most of us. We control stuff. We live in a world where we control every bit of the computer, or we're almost, except humans, but that's another issue. What do you think will happen when we actually get to that part, 10, 20 years, when we can actually make machines do that? Do you think we will be able to keep them controlled in some way, or do you think there's nothing stopping a machine from thinking, what am I doing here? What am I doing here taking orders from a human? I'm a lot stronger, I think a lot faster, I have a lot more easier locomotion, so I can probably overcome them. Why won't that happen? Or will they actually think like us, oh, they are my creators, I owe them some respect, and where do you think robotics will go?
So the question is basically, traditionally we program robots and we have some kind of control if we don't mess up the code, right, of what the robot will do. And in this case, we do not have control, and the robots are actually deciding on its own. And when you train a network, it's a black box. You can't just look at the network and see if it's close to a wall. No, it's just a bunch of connections, okay? So you don't really know everything that a robot might do. And if you get into more complex and more complex networks, it's even worse. You can test everything. So the example that I gave of the drone, it's a bit tricky to try to use neural network because the drone can get out of control really fast and do things that you never thought it would do, okay? So in the future, how will this affect us? I don't know if you read anything by Asimo. Basically, we have... okay. So he introduced the idea of the three laws of robotics, right? And that's all, something you can always do on top of a neural network or any other thing that might come in the future. So you can have a high-level routine that checks, okay, you are not supposed to be killing a human, stop, right? That's the worst case scenario. But I think that in the end, you can always control, you can have a filter on the actions of the robots. Although this is really something that you cannot answer right now. And but the whole idea of singularity is that if it's going to happen, it's going to happen either way, whatever we do, right?
Because we developers know that everything built with software can be destroyed with software. So if you have a sort of filter telling the robot you can't do that, what's stopping him from learning how to program and remove the filter?
Nothing. Yes, that's a bit of a danger. Although
that's why the laws have been revised.
Yes.
3 or 4 times.
Yes, but although I do think that it's a bit still in the science fiction realm. We are not so close there that we have to worry about that. The things that we evolve are very simple. If the lighting conditions of the lab are not ideal, it's not going to work the same way because the sensors are not perfect, okay? So right now we are still far away, so you don't have to worry right now. Maybe your grandchildren will have to worry.
What worries me is that these things usually happen exponentially.
Yes,
you know?
that is true.
Today we have nothing. When we start having something, if you can create a machine that can evolve based on its own sensors, it will do it extremely quickly.
Yes. If it can control the whole evolutionary process from then on, it's game over, I think. So let's just be careful about what we do. Tá bem. Não posso responder esta, não é? Okay. So I think we have to evacuate the dome, but we can talk outside if you want.